going into it with a even a modicum of reverence for what it is, what orgasm is, the gift of it, we're stepping into a rite of passage. Because it is absolutely true, one of the really profound things about this thing we call sexuality, and really the dance of intimacy, is that if we're really paying attention, we of course don't come out the same person who went in. And I mean, of course we don't, if we're talking about the very thing that has the capacity to bring new life into the world. But even if we choose not to be doing that, we're still cultivating almost all of that energy. And so each time we step into the experience, we are, whether conscious or not, we're playing with the death of a former self. So by its very definition, it's a rite of passage. It's an initiation into the next iteration of us.
I have to say this. I'm mouth-watering. I've been mouth-watering for 30 minutes.
That's wonderful. I mean, I think it's wonderful.
It is. It's, yeah. This is amazing.
Yeah, I'm loving your questions. I'm loving how you track. You're a marvelous interviewer.
Thank you.
Or inspirator. You're not, interviewing is too didactic.
I'll try to come back to
yeah,
this.
Absolutely.
Although we're
jump around. We can ping pong all over the place.
So the question is, how is our human wildness and the world's wildness, the earth's wildness, connected? How are they connected?
Well, that's interesting. That tells me that I've gotten so far out in my thinking that there are some questions I almost don't even know how to answer. So let's see if we can bring it back to sort of the very basic level of this. Let me ask that question back to you to make sure I've got it. How is our human wildness related to the world's wildness?
Yeah.
We're children of the world. We come from them. We come from all the wild beings. We are the wild beings. We have insulated ourselves and exiled ourselves. Such a profound this process of exile. And we're fundamentally, my DNA and your DNA is just a few points off from the DNA of this puppy. He's just a few points off from the DNA of the wolves who are roaming in Wyoming right now and making their way across the border and finding new tribe. There is, we are inherently wild. And if I'm saying the same thing over and over again, it's that one of my greatest griefs is that we've created a culture that is not predicated on that basic assumption. Because it's almost hard for me to answer that question or to speak to that statement. It goes without saying that for me to truly feel my identity and know my name, I go back into the wild. I go back home and I gather that information after being seen by the ones who know because they created me. I bring that information back to my people and I say, this is who I am. And they say, yes, we see that. We get that. It's good to meet you. Now get to work. So it's almost hard to, find to find a place in that conversation, because it just feels like, what else are we? What other relationship is there? If there's not that relationship, I assure you, there is no other relationship. That's the first one. Dangerous terrain.
A question that I've been developing and you've answered already throughout, and I want to see if we can flush it out maybe in a different way and see what comes up. Related to our wildness and to the world wildness is how are sexuality and intimacy portals for our rewilding?
Yeah. So this is where we can bring in some of the attachment, that is the attachment theory and practice that I find to be some of the most exciting information, empirical information coming out of the academic world. Kind of where the two worlds are meeting here is in my experience, in the overlap of these two worlds. So ultimately, or fundamentally, what we're talking about is our capacity for relationship. Is our capacity to be in an intimate give and take, as if life depended on it, because it does, process and dance with life. That's ultimately what our greatest longing is, and it's our most profound practice, and it's what's so desperately needed at this time for us to be making decisions as this profound, this very, very high impact species on the planet, human beings. Ultimately, what we're looking for is the capacity to be an intimate, dynamic relationship with the world itself. And sexuality, not only what we call sexuality, but the larger experience of sexuality, the reality of sexuality, is an invitation here and now, in the flesh, guided, aided by chemicals, by millions of years of programming and thrust and lust and longing and drive, to have just that, to move toward each other. Regardless of what we've made it into and what it's become, it's still at its core. It's still here. Sexuality is an unavoidable, not possible to ignore calling, to which we are all drawn. I've had some men, highly accomplished men in the world, men who have been recognized by the day world, and well-educated, well-compensated, turn to me and say, don't let anyone fool you. It's all about sex. It's all we are actually looking for when we go out in the world and we, put on our ties and we suit up and we get out there and we put on the man face. And it's fundamentally all we're actually wanting. And so it's right here. It's such an invitation to it doesn't, I can't quite understand why all of us aren't teaching it, why all of us aren't just putting all our eggs in that basket, because it feels like the one, biggest bang for our buck. You want to know how to get back into intimacy. You want to remember how to have relationship. You want to have an experience of yourself as this one who knows how to die and be reborn, who knows how, who has this extraordinary, limitless capacity to move through any possible life event. To create yourself as a charismatic being to whom all beings are drawn. It's right, it's all through the portal of sexuality. When we free our sexual energy, when we have just the right reign, just this reverent, gentle reign of it, we are unstoppable. Not in a tyrannical way, of course, because true sexuality requires power with, not power over. So sexuality and intimacy are the right here, right in our face, this thing we just, we want it so bad. Like, I just want to be able to I want to get it up so I can please this woman. Like, I want to be able to have that orgasm everyone's talking about where I squirt. I want to be able to, whatever it is. That it's right here, right now. It's not ethereal. It might feel ephemeral, but it's certainly right here, right now. It's in our tissue. It's in our bones. It's in our DNA. Frankly, it's the cheapest, fastest way to remember ourselves as relational beings, first and foremost, built exquisitely for just this thing. Relational beings.
How do we get there?
Well, first of all, tell me where, because I don't want to assume. Where are we getting?
To this. I'm not. It's difficult to name.
Yeah.
To this authentic, alive, embodied sexuality. How do we get to that truly?
Mm-hmm.
It is my theory or opinion that it's what we long for. Mm-hmm. It's what we long for through porn. It's what we long through various ecstatic practices, addictions, and then we're seeking that through different portals and through different means. And I wonder if if the earth plays a role in this. I wonder if there's a more direct highway, a clearer human portal to this sexuality.
Wow, that's another kind of $1 million question, because it really is one step at a time, and every step along the way we're met with obstacles in this culture. So it's a tricky road. It's a really tricky road. But certainly one of the first steps is to bring it home. Is to kind of pull back in all our trolling lines and our nets and our, turn the reflective field from facing outwards to facing inward. Because it starts right here. It starts by reclaiming the energy that moves through us as ours. Mine is so vastly different than yours, and we want it that way. It must be that way. As soon as it stops being that way, vast, beautiful awarenesses concerning the nature of what it means to be alive today go entirely unnoticed and uncelebrated. So the first step, and one of the first things we do here in this room, is to help people understand that we're taught to throw all our energy out, to externalize all our sexual energy and make it about other things, make it about you. If I'm feeling turned on in your presence, well, that must be because of something you are, and therefore it's about you. No, it could be all projection on my part. I don't have any idea. It's mine. It's being stirred in me. It's my chemistry, and now it's my awareness. And this is my life force. What I choose to do with that, that's a profound choice point right there. This is what's created this culture right here, what we've chosen to do with it. So one of the first steps is to really, again, I use this word at least once before, but to get very monastic in our holding, our cultivation, and our understanding of what is sexual energy. And after that, which could happen in the space of 30 seconds, I could have a realization, that's right, it's actually mine. It's my chemistry that's responding this way. And I'm responding to all sorts of things. Then we can open our awareness and realize, open our sense of possibility and realize how many beings, how many others stir our energy. So it's a process of reclaiming and bringing home, and without that first step, that sounds kind of lackluster, I'm not sure much else is possible, because it's all out there before we've done that. We're at the whim and mercy of some hot thing walking by, please let the hot thing walk by, because I'm desperate for without that first step, not much is possible.
The rewilding in some ways is the reclaiming.
Yeah.
Okay, we're almost an hour.
Okay.
Let's talk about shame. Let's bringing the what role does shame play in sexuality in this culture?
Well, so we'll get a little conspiratorial here and say that I speak about the culture as if it's its own entity at this point. I believe it to be a living, breathing entity. And that we have imbued this being with such a will and force of its own that I actually believe that it's created its own inertia. It has its own momentum at this point. So having said that, then I can say that, or that will make sense perhaps, that when I say that it is in the culture's best interest for us to have flatlined or exiled ours from our true nature, from an expectation that our lives are ours, and that we are born in service to the world at large, not the culture, but the world at large, and that we each have a unique, a beautifully, essentially unique language. Some people say without which the world will not be whole. So it is incumbent upon the culture, with its own life force energy to survive, to raise us in a way that keeps us alienated or in exile from our true nature. And shame is its army of one. So shame, and it often bears just visiting that shame and guilt are not the same thing. That guilt often is experienced as a sense of remorse or being less than for an action that I took, for a way I behaved, for something about myself that I have the capacity to change. So guilt is fleeting. Shame, the definition of shame and the reason that it's particularly insidious is that it is a sense of being fundamentally less than for reasons that are out of my control. That I am fundamentally not worthy. That the way that I am, how I was born, what I innately want, who I innately am, how I innately view the world is fundamentally wrong. And what an extraordinary thing to be able to have shame as your army of one. It's really a trump card. We can't get at it by arguing in a verbal way with anybody. No, you're not. That you're actually beautiful. No, you're really truly good. It's not logical that you would be born, in a flawed way. Doesn't matter. Shame somehow, we don't just wear it like we do guilt. Shame, it manages to work its way into the marrow of our bones, and it becomes a way of identifying ourselves. And we are tragically crippled. We are tragically maimed in the experience of our shame. It's certainly not irrevocable. It's not irrevocable. Because in my experience, there's one thing stronger than shame, and that is the force of life to right itself, the will of life. So, with permission and with witness, shame scurries. I've had the experience of actually hearing it scurry. And yeah. Well, I'm going to stop there and see if you want to ask another question about it, because in some ways we're only just getting to the surface of it, but it is a profoundly important piece of the work of rewilding.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you spoke about the witness, mm-hmm. the importance of being witnessed, mm-hmm. and almost a chemical capacity of shame to then mm-hmm. run away. I wonder how that relates to how this relationship between being witness and shame relates mm-hmm. to sexuality in particular.
In particular.
And the body.
Absolutely. That's a big one. Let's see. Sexuality, our sexual energy, is really, we like to say, well, it's at the core of us. Well, it really is. It is what brought us into the world. It's the push and pull and pulse of life that brings us through the world. It is insatiable. It is, and we are all, as you said, we are longing for it to live in us in an unbridled way, in a way that allows us to feel our fullness, our life, our juice. Shame, when attached to our sexuality, if we are shamed about our sexuality, we are in some ways shamed. We in some ways experience shame in every breath we take, because it's sexuality that impels us. In my experience, it is this generative energy that impels us to breathe, live, thrive, carry on, procreate. It is, so if we are shamed in our sexuality, you just got us at the core. We are then in a place of questioning everything about what we do. And then we're in a process of having to overcome, by means of faking and falseness, our way into the world, so that we might be perceived by others as whole and full and sure. So shame in our sexuality is probably the most fundamentally damaging experience that we can have as humans. And having said that, it's also in my experience, you talked about, I mentioned witness and then you mentioned it again, is a very, very important piece of shame in our sexuality. While it might feel really entrenched and intractable, what led me to move in the direction that I did and in creating the rewilding and in taking the rewilding out of this kind of talk therapy mode and in much more into a show me, let me see you. Let me experience you in this. Was this idea that if we could be witnessed in our shame would have no place to hide. Shame survives in its hiding. It survives in the shadow. It really cannot survive in the light. So when you bring a person, give a person permission, create the environment, the container for safety and true invitation and true reverence, and you invite a person into their own sexual practice, and they come up against the shame, which often happens right as they're right at that threshold where something primal or primary, some first experience of life is about to take us over. And shame comes right in, beautifully invited onto stage. No, you're bad for this. No, this is dirty. This is wrong. This is evil. That you want this means something about you that makes you less than. If you can be witnessed in this place, if somebody can stay with you and say, I'm giving you permission, I see you here, I'm seeing what's happening, and I'm inviting you to move in, to lean closer, to stay with this, take a chance, try this out. The power of witness and permission is absolutely where it's at. There's no other intervention. There are no words in this realm that have the capacity to strip and send out shame. Nothing comes close to the capacity of the witness.
So there's a picture that came as you were speaking.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this picture of a man or a woman. One that is desperately longing to reconnect with their primal aliveness, with their primal wildness, with their primal sexuality. And shame is this gatekeeper, in a sense, that comes in and blocks the way before we can tap into our original self.
Absolutely.
And community or witnessing, witnessing by the other, so relationship is the key to that door. Absolutely.
Yes. Shame survives in silence and secrecy. And therefore, it is, while it feels so powerfully entrenched, it's rather easy to find it and to dispel it, to immobilize it, to disempower it. Because all it really takes is a person being seen and essentially loved in their primal capacity, or doing anything for which they feel shame. and to feel that attachment and that relationship, and that the witness is not going anywhere. The witness is just loving them. Look at how beautiful you are. I see you right here. I see your unique personhood right here. That's the very thing that was undone in order for shame to have a place to live in us. So while it is so insidious and it's deeply dangerous, because we hide in our silence and shame, it's the last thing we'll talk about. If we have the courage to talk about it, if we have the courage to be witnessed, if we have the courage to come to lock horns with this shame, it's a very rather quick process of sending it out.
This, I almost want to flesh out or name, at least, if there is a difference between how shame, particularly sexual shame, shows up for men, and whatever that leads, if it's rage or whatever that conversation would open to.
Yes.
For men and for women, if there's any similarities or differences.
You know, there for sure are, and there's another piece that feels particularly, I think because, and I'm going to generalize about your gender, so forgive me, from what I've experienced in the men that whom I've loved, and the man I love right now, and the way that men come to me and describe their experience versus the way that women do, and what I experience as a woman. Men are particularly susceptible to shame because men live in the world in this, in a way that is all about claiming, and that's very sexual. Women live in a world that's all about generating and nurturing, and again, I'm generalizing madly, and women's studies institutions will seethe and froth, but this is really fundamentally what the genders are about, and God help us if we ever forget that, and we are forgetting it. But men live in the world in their stallionhood in a way that's about claiming. In a way that's about, leading and in a power with way that's all about protecting the beauty and the possibility of life so that it can become. And that is deeply sexual. Like men, I don't know a man who has come back into his wild, in relationship self, who doesn't just live and breathe fucking. Beautiful, whether he actually is making love to other humans, two-leggeds, or is just in the world in a way that is unapologetically, I want to say conquering, and I want to say in the most beautiful way, like, I'm here, my feet are on this earth, I'm alive and I'm vital, and I want to procreate, I want to make it happen. Shame, so men in this way live a particularly overt sexuality in the world. Highly visual, highly chemical, robust masculinity is really susceptible to shame, sexual shame, because men in their stallionhood are so overtly sexual. It's glorious, so overtly sexual. Women have all sorts of things going on that are how we exert ourselves in the world in a sexual way, and there's a receptivity to it, there's a certainly we claim as well, and it's possible for us to fuck, and we have that desire, but it's of a very different tenor than men. And men have been taught to be ashamed of this. And this energy has been co-opted. It's so beautifully co-optable. This mission-driven warrior energy is, you're like, oh, go fight this war for me. Okay, I need to have a mission. I need to be in service too. So there's a way in which men are particularly susceptible to sexual shame. What I would love to say is, or what needs to be said is that women certainly are susceptible to shame. And I see all sorts of women and have experienced my own shame around my sexuality in certain areas of it. Women are also susceptible to a type of fear that is almost as insidious as shame. And what we tend to fear is the hugeness of what can come through us in our sexuality, is this total evisceration in the moment of who we are. That's possible for women in an orgasmic altered state of consciousness. And that's terrifying if it's not held. And we have been taught to be afraid of this. So when men feel their sexual fullness coming into play and they feel claiming and they're just woo in the world, shame comes in. Women tend to have an experience of fear coming in. That's not safe. Don't do this. Don't go here. We might never come back. So there is, more often than not, with men I work on shame, and with women I work on fear. And that's just, for whatever reason, that's been my experience in my practice.
A sense for women that the fear is a gatekeeper. And would it be true to say that fear for women is a gatekeeper to their wildness, to their primal self?
And the same way that men have been pathologized for their innate, what I call stallionhood, that beautiful drive, women have been pathologized and vilified for our capacity